territorio libre en América.
Tune into a state broadcaster in Cuba and you hear one story. A story about unity, sacrifice and revolution.
Las voces que forman parte de la historia y el presente de nuestra revolución socialista.
Tune into the version being beamed into Cuba out of Miami.
Noticias objetivas y programas de información sin censura.
And you'll hear another story, a different narrative about privatization, entrepreneurship and freedom to speak, to buy, to travel.
Las cartas de invitación de alguien en el extranjero que costaban hasta $200 en un país con un salario promedio de $20 al mes.
Radio Marti.
This is Radio and TV Marti, a US government-controlled broadcaster based in Miami, transmitting to an audience in Cuba, targeting those sacred cows the Cuban state and its media have tried so hard to preserve, the socialist ideals of free health, education and housing. Watch Marti, and those ideals are in a state of crisis.
For example, the idea of the healthcare system. It was considered one of the pillars of the revolution, the free access to health. But by the several reporters that we have working for us on the island, across the island, we see that reality for everyday folks of access to good medical health is limited.
Las pruebas más fehacientes de que la salud pública en Cuba no es exactamente lo que el gobierno castrista ha querido exponer ante los ojos del mundo.
I believe that the job of a journalist is to also become a watchdog of the authorities.
Only that this watchdog has never been an independent one. Radio Marti was set up in 1983 by the Reagan administration, followed in the early 90s by TV Marti. The government also created an Office of Cuba Broadcasting to manage and oversee the Marti network. The OCB says it ensures that Radio TV Marti's news output is, quote, accurate, objective, and comprehensive. Cuba was not a unique target for the US's media forays. In the Cold War era, media was a key propaganda tool in the fight against communism.
This station daily pierces the Iron Curtain with the truth.
But Cuba has always been in a different category, its proximity to its enemy making it much more of a target.
The mission is clearly stated. It is a government broadcaster, and so its job, its duty, its responsibility is to broadcast the government policy in Cuba.
We're about Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is about the right of people to have information, to decide their future, right? It's not to overthrow the Castro regime, it's none of that. It's about the free flow of information.
Imagine if Cuba suddenly had enough money to waste and started producing programs that they would try to put into the United States to influence the American public. Would that be allowed? This is propaganda. It's a government trying to undo your government. If you were to ask me, has any of this worked? The only thing that has worked is upsetting the Cuban government. That's it. That's all they've accomplished.
For the past 30 years, Marti has broadcast a concentrated version of a narrative that's dominated the US news space on Cuba, a pro-embargo, anti-Castro line. But things are changing, and as US-Cuban relations warm, a new news narrative is emerging, featuring buzzwords like détente, rapprochement, dialogue. The question is whether Marti is going to reflect those shifts or risk becoming a relic of the past. Picking up on that, President Raúl Castro called for the closure of the channel as a condition for normalizing relations with the US. He's not alone. It costs $27 million a year, and many in the US Congress see it as a waste of public money. Recently, the White House proposed to make Radio and TV Marti into a separate, independent body. In other words, to reduce federal funding. They say the proposal is economic, an attempt to modernize the broadcaster, and unrelated to the US-Cuban political thaw.
We simply propose that we strike the funding for TV Marti, a program that doesn't work.
This is a totally different place than years back. We are an outlet where the people in Cuba rely to obtain their news and information. Our journalists here have created relationships with the people of Cuba over 20 years, 30 years. This is not the outlet that people used to report on, and it's just a totally different place.
It's a waste of taxpayers' money. And over the years, it's estimated they've wasted more than $500 million on things that people in Cuba don't listen to, people in Cuba don't see. The experts say, if it reaches people in Cuba, it's about a 1% reach.
In a fight for survival, the channel has grown more inventive. Radio and TV Marti is trying to break into Cuba by sending thousands of DVDs, external hard drives, and USB sticks. A makeshift and semi-legal alternative to the internet.
It arrives in Cuba once a week. Nobody knows exactly where it comes from or who has the original version, but it's huge. While Radio Marti had been sort of historically, let's say, having problems with the audience, I think TV Marti may be getting more and more foothold because of the other new means of delivering the information.
I think that we're very important in this process of transition, and we have to remember that Cuba has been under one rule for more than 50 years, under one party, and this process of normalizing the diplomatic relations will take time. And until there's free access to information, I think that this institution is perhaps now more important than ever.
Defiant words, but they fail to take into account the winds of change blowing from Washington through Florida and across the Caribbean Sea to La Habana. Radio Marti's days and broadcasts look numbered. Having been born of ideology, it could well die a death from diplomacy.
More voices on the download now. Our viewers on Radio and TV Marti beaming into Cuba from Miami.
Radio Marti tuvo una importancia trascendental en la sensación de libertad que quería tener el cubano. Creo que es más importante, sobre todo en los 90, cuando había una situación económica terrible. Ahora bien, con los nuevos tiempos, la tecnología ha ido sustituyendo completamente lo que es la radio en Cuba y sobre todo Radio Marti. Las personas incluso dejaron de prestarle mucha atención debido a falta de credibilidad en algunos casos. Se sabía que se estaba haciendo política, no necesariamente periodismo.
The US funded media and the Cuban state-run media need to acknowledge the variety of points of views that citizens have currently in Cuba. The blogosphere and digital publications have opened spaces for critical debate, questioning the official version, pushing the boundaries of what can be publicly discussed, and even forcing the state-run media to acknowledge problems and to give an answer. The problem is that those spaces are still very fragmented. They are unable to create an open public debate.
Finally, Vine is to YouTube what Twitter is to blogs. It's a short-form, video-sharing website where you get just 6 seconds to do your thing. When Vine was founded in 2012, it caught the attention of a film school graduate in Los Angeles named Zach King. King has since created something that's come to be called the Magic Vine, video clips that are just 2 or 3 vines long at the most, showing what King describes as some digital sleight of hand. The Magic Vines have become some of the most watched clips on the site. King now has 3.3 million followers, and his videos have been looped nearly 1 billion times. We've compiled a few to end the program, from the theft of the Eiffel Tower to some high-speed hitchhiking. And we'll see you next time here at the Listening Post.
Grabbing a souvenir from France. Oh, merci beaucoup. Oh, I'm late to dinner. Ah! Oh, this is our stop, dude. This is how I hitchhike. Don't you hate the spinny wheel of death?